Hey everybody, Pat Fenner here with Breakthrough Homeschooling, and I am thrilled to death to be sharing with you or introducing you to my friend Michelle Huddleston, who is a homeschooler, and she blogs at With the Huddlestons. Uh, just an awesome entrepreneur, homeschooler. You'll love her to death as much as I do, I'm sure. So basically, Michelle and I have been talking just about unrelated things, but this wonderful Harvard article came up the other day, and she had casually mentioned to me that she had done some history on, or some research on the history of homeschooling in the United States. Now, she did it for a purely personal level. She just wasn't quite, you know how we have those doubts about our homeschooling. Are we doing it right? Are the kids learning? And Michelle's answer to that was to look into what the history of homeschooling was, or education, to see if she could find some clues there. And what she discovered was that she was just trying to replicate school at home, which really gave her some clarity. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I think it gave you some clarity, and you realized how you could better move forward in homeschooling. So there were a couple of comments in the article from Harvard, that magazine that we are referring to, and what prompted me to interview Michelle, that I would like to speak to, because it deals with the history of education in our country. And so I want to start with this quote, and then Michelle will just go. So the first quote that I want to refer to is in this article. It says, "From the beginning of compulsory education in this country, we have thought of the government as having some right to educate children so that they become active, productive participants in the larger society. But it's also important that children grow up exposed to community values, social values, democratic values, ideas about non-discrimination, and tolerance of other people's viewpoints." Basically, the author of the article was saying homeschoolers are not equipped to do that, hence public education. So Michelle, if you can turn your mic on for us, and
Okay.
what is your take on that based on your knowledge of the history of public education in our country?
Okay. Thanks, Pat. And thank you so much for having me, because this is definitely near and dear to our hearts. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully people will hear the heart of the matter. But let me
Yes.
pull up my notes, just because the thing about the history of education, um, honestly, there was a lot of different eras, that we're familiar
Sure.
with, from the Revolutionary era and all the way up. But something that I noted with all of these eras was education being used as a mechanism for social control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Erin didn't really realize that she pulled out of her quote was that reinforced with the belief that, oh, well, the government needs to have control over that.
Right.
But, and then the rest of that sentence that I have with education being used as a mechanism for social control in a society undergoing constant cultural and demographic change, which is a natural part of life.
Sure.
People move in, people move out, we migrate from different countries and all of that. So there is always this cultural and demographic change,
Mm-hmm.
but the need for the government to have such a control
Mm-hmm.
over every aspect, including education, actually should be alarming to me.
Right.
It is alarming to me, and I'm basically saying maybe other people should kind of see the red flag, like, okay, wait, because the key word with government involvement is control.
Right.
And to assume that they are better equipped to control that aspect versus the parents' inalienable right.
Mm-hmm.
If we get into, a lot of people don't talk about or even know about inalienable rights, but the children that were born to me, I have the inalienable right to raise them properly, to give them, education as I see fit, and so forth and so on. So more about the history, though, of education going back to Jefferson's bill. And I'm talking about 1778 now. So we're
Okay.
way back.
Mhm.
Jefferson's bill for the more general diffusion of knowledge, because
Mhm.
back then, the funny thing about when you start reading about things back then, the
Uh-huh.
terminology used is so different.
I
It's
know.
so proper and so like, okay, so what does that actually mean to
But
us?
you know what astounds me about that is that the common people understood that and could read that. I mean, we have now educated people who would be like, what does that mean? And they have to look up every word and, you know, things like that. I mean,
Hmm.
the Federalist Papers were published in the newspaper for the common man to read.
Yes.
Have you ever read one of them? Oh my gosh.
I was going to
And
say, I've tried.
yeah. And I have a college degree and I'm like, oh, whoa, I can only do this. So
I'm telling you, I get lost, but
we
I
have
mean,
been
it's
dumbed down. I think John Taylor Gatto, that's something there. But anyway,
that's it.
we
That's it.
digress. I'm sorry.
Yes. But going back to Jefferson's bill, it was actually established then how school systems would be required to operate. But also, and this is kind of where Aaron kind of has a point, because religious instruction,
Mhm.
um, it was there, but at the time of Jefferson's bill, um, it was absent from the curriculum.
Right.
He suggested that children be taught, or you could say indoctrinated, um, but taught the most useful facts from a Grecian, Roman, European,
Mhm.
aspect.
Right.
Um, but then we have Jefferson's proposal for a two-track educational system.
Mhm.
So with this, basically that just translates into the laboring and the learned.
Mhm.
So for him, the laboring would be kind of equivalent to how we would say today that children are basically being trained to be workers,
Mhm.
to be like the worker ants. And I hate to put it that way, but that's where Aaron's, democratic, thing. Children are being taught how to fit right
Fit
into the
in.
workforce.
Right. Right.
Find your place like a worker bee. The bee
Mhm.
movie came to my head. But then Jefferson talks about the learned, and these are the ones that, in our eyes, go off to college, get the degrees, and
Right.
own the businesses, which is so crazy because a lot of business owners will tell you today either A, they don't even have a degree,
Mhm.
they're full blown second and third generation entrepreneurs, and or they got the degree, but they don't even really use it.
Oh yeah.
You know
Guilty.
what I mean?
I'm one of them.
Me
Mhm.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
well, yeah, because I don't use my teaching degree to teach my kids. I just,
Mhm.
I don't.
Right.
So fast forward, then we have this tighter hand from the government on education. And it's like, okay, well, now we need to make it available for poor children, because the rich will pay for their schooling, but we
Right.
need the poor to be able to come up to that level of laboring.
Right.
We need to teach them something so they can be meaningful members of society.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then what we have here is these schools emphasize discipline and obedience qualities that factory owners want in their workers.
Right.
So it's all about this. Let us control it so we know for a fact that at least we're going to have 60% filling our factories, our fast food places, our,
Right.
that level. And then we have this 30 something percent who might
Educated.
be successful in college.
Mhm.
And then, you have to account for that percent that, just maybe not work, not get a further education,
Yeah.
whatever. So this is the setup of the schooling. This
Mhm.
is how, um, from that time on, different laws were passed. And now fast forward to today, and it just really boggles my mind that her quote failed to really take into consideration how the school system is set up today.
Right.
Because, and I want to go down here, while they wanted the school system to improve productivity and efficiency, with the whole learning model that they were setting up, we have visible proof today that that system is actually kind of breaking.
Mhm.
Um, they're good teachers, but what's sad about it is good teachers don't really change a
Well, the
bad
system.
system.
Exactly,
You know
exactly.
what I mean? That what it is, it's a bad system who just so happens to have good teachers. I have a few friends I graduated with, amazing teachers. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Like if I did do public schooling, like I would be like, I want that teacher to
That
be my
teach
kid's teacher. You know
right.
what I mean? Because
Mhm.
there are good teachers, but it's the system that is not really together. So
Right.
her quote kind of doesn't speak to the nature, but I did want to tell you what I found out with the history of homeschooling as well, because I did a like a 4 or 5 part study for myself.
Mhm.
And what I found with the history of homeschooling, not only does it date back to basically the
Well,
beginning of time,
yeah,
but
really.
um, something that I
Besides that.
found, right. And, you know, let's not mention um, uh, other homeschoolers like President Lincoln and
Only
C.S.
a gajillion
Lewis
of
and
them. Right.
Virginia Woolf. I mean, you know, who are they? Who's John Adams and
Yeah.
John Quincy? You know, they were just homeschooled. That's all.
That's
But something that I found super grounding for myself and that served as like a breakthrough, like, okay, I can deschool myself.
Mhm.
But here's where I want to say this to her quote about basically homeschoolers being, I'm paraphrasing the mess out of this, but this is how I read it. Like when I read it, this is how I processed it. Basically, homeschoolers are like a threat to the future.
Right. Well, she does
So
say that, a threat to democracy and our yeah.
So I found this very interesting piece, and I'm just going to read it verbatim how I have it
Uh-huh.
written. So, in essence, home education has always been seen as the bringing up and instruction of children to enlighten their understanding, instill their philosophy, develop their morals, form their manners, correct their tempers, give them knowledge, and train their skills, such as in reading, language,
Mhm.
mathematics, and so on, and fit them for usefulness in their families, associations, and communities. So, if
Okay.
that is the true essence of home education, which a lot of us probably share, like if you know how we all do our why we homeschool,
Right.
and we
Yeah.
develop our own, you know, like
Mhm.
basically our own code and stuff,
Yeah.
like this, whether you're Christian, atheist, Hebrew,
Yeah.
whatever, there is no religion found in what I just mentioned. It is strictly like we are raising you to be meaningful members of society.
Absolutely. Can I ask where's that, what's the source for that quote? Where did you find that?
You know, I'm going to have to look at my toolbar
Okay,
to
that's
grab
fine.
it because I don't think I put it down here at the bottom of,
That's a wonderful,
actually, I might
and
have
while you're
it.
looking that up, I want to share the second quote that in that article that I had mentioned with to you prior to
Hmm.
this video. Homeschooling, the author says, not only violates a children's right to a meaningful education and their right to be protected from potential child abuse, but may keep them from contributing positively to a democratic society. Well, that quote that you have, the purpose of home education, directly contradicts that. And I'd love to know where she did her research for that article because it, it, there's logical fallacies as well as historical and inaccuracies that yeah, right. So I just, yeah, I think that's interesting that homeschoolers, it's whether or not we're intending, and I think many of us do intend to shield or protect our younger children from things that are inappropriate, age inappropriate for them.
Hmm.
um, the net result is that they are better able to handle things and better able to deal with things and better able to be proactive and involved when they're older. So
Hmm.
it's just like, when you set out seedlings in the spring, you cover them and you mulch them and you protect them so that the first frost or the last frost of the season won't kill them, but then they're a stronger plant. Well,
Absolutely.
that's what we're doing, and
Hmm.
And I think anybody that can even do a cursory search on how homeschoolers end up behaving, or how they handle college and how far they go, and how many entrepreneurs, how many jobs are developed and started by homeschoolers, how politically active we actually do get. you know
Mm-hmm.
uh,
That's it.
it doesn't take much research to see that. So anyway.
And that's I spoke with a because we have a community college here.
Mm-hmm.
And we recently, you know how bigger colleges will add an extended campus to like a
Mm-hmm.
neighboring town. So
Right.
we have an extended campus to a bigger college that's in the town over. But she was telling me this was, shoot, at least 3, maybe almost 4 years ago. Um, she was like, you know what? At first, we were not equipped to handle homeschoolers
Mm.
because she was like, they were just testing off the charts. They were coming at not the normal age,
Right.
but ready and able, and she was like, we were not really prepared, but now we're actually seeking out
Mm-hmm.
them. And it was funny because Harvard was on that list
Yes.
of seeking out to
Isn't
have a
that
certain
interesting?
number of homeschoolers,
Right.
and I hate, to make it about that, but it almost has to be to a certain extent, just for people to understand that it's just not how education, it's not what formal education looks like anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where formal education came from, because
Mm-hmm.
the public school hasn't always been,
Mm-hmm.
but homeschooling has always been.
Right.
It's just, it's taken a rap because once public and private education, and no one's talking about private schools in the midst of all this. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, what about the private schoolers? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they're like one step from homeschooling. They just have their own mandates and stuff, because I think no one's touching them because it's a different,
Right.
they're not
Right.
government owned, or,
Yeah.
government
Yeah. They.
run, I should say.
Right.
So I understand why people aren't really touching them. But still,
Yeah.
why can't they come under fire? Like, do they not need to be mandated or looked over?
Well,
Or,
at least in the kids that go there are in the machine somehow. They're still it's still going to class and have group instruction. So we can.
I
The
like how you
time
said
may
that,
come. The time may come. So,
in the
well,
machine.
Michelle, I, I want to thank you for sharing that. And I hope those of you who have been listening in on this are encouraged, because the point that I'd like to make, and the takeaway I'd like you to have from this, is that homeschooling has been around for a very long time. It's been very successful for a very long time. There are
Mhm.
crazies in everything and everywhere, homeschoolers, public schoolers, however you want to look at it. Uh, but at the core, at least of the homeschooling heart, is to do the best for our kids, to have them be contributing citizens. We're not, I don't, I think, as a generalization, since we're speaking generalizations like she is in the article, uh, in a generalization, we are trying to do the best for our kids, to make them productive members of society. We're not trying to shelter them and hide them, as they become adults, and just pull away from society, and to just make a characteristic of homeschooling and say that there should be a ban on that, because that is what homeschoolers do or are, is misleading, is incorrect.
It's a bold statement. When I
It's a
read
bold
that,
thing.
that is to put, using her words, ban the
Mm-hmm.
practice. Um, that like kind of zinged
Mm-hmm.
my chest a little bit, because I thought, it's one thing to say add a little bit more, because I guess maybe she's not quite familiar, but there are quite a few states that have what some would consider strenuous homeschool
Regulations.
laws. I mean,
Right.
you have to, like, I'm Kentucky, right under me, 10 miles to the Tennessee border.
Mm-hmm.
Homeschool laws, changed drastically between Kentucky and Tennessee. Tennessee,
Absolutely.
you need to be under an umbrella school. You have to take these tests. And
Hmm.
so when I read ban the practice, I thought I could understand maybe asking the states, the relaxed states like Kentucky, Missouri, Texas, we're all pretty relaxed, to
Hmm.
have a little bit more accountability. I could actually rest
Probably would go. Yeah.
better, with
Right.
having read her article with that suggestion. But to ban the practice, homeschooling is not a practice. And so many of us who are pioneering for home education
Right.
try to comfort parents with the fact that homeschooling is not this extra entity that is sitting over here that we just do. It's a part of our lifestyle.
Mhm.
When you're a homeschooling family, and this is what I tell a lot of people who email me, like, just how do I make sense of it? How do I get through it and it not be so stressful or overwhelming or just downright hard? I say, well, how are you looking at it? Because
Right.
yeah, it parenting is a job.
Hmm.
Homeschooling can be looked at as a job, but when we embrace it as a part of our lifestyle and who we are, then the moments in the kitchen when we're all cooking together is homeschooling.
It all becomes part of a fabric, you know.
Absolutely.
And
Of
and
the
the
same
freedom
blanket.
and the freedom that we have to choose that is at the very core of the freedoms that our country were founded on. That people came to this country, to this land, and wanted to start a new experiment in freedom and democracy because they came from countries that had heavy-handed governments.
Hmm.
And for us to revert to that, or to appeal to our government to once again become heavy-handed, is totally contradicts the foundation of this government.
Yeah, I agree.
So
So
let's
there
leave it
is no
there.
practice to ban.
That's right.
Aaron, I'm sorry, sweetheart. There's no practice to ban. You're asking me to not practice being a parent. Like, you
To not
know,
practice not being an American citizen.
absolutely.
I mean, on so many levels.
That's the core of it.
On so many levels, yeah.
That's the core of it. I could understand if we didn't have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If
Now
we
let's
didn't
just get
have all of that, I could understand it.
right.
But
Let's just get rid of that.
we have that. I wanted to tell you that the resource
Oh, that
for
quote. Yeah.
my you can actually find it at two different. I have them at well, they don't have the copy of the handbook, but you do
Right.
homeschoolfreedom.com/history dash of dash homeschooling.
Okay. And I will put that link in the things. Do you want me to put a
Okay.
link to that, to your book as well, that you your handbook?
It's
Are you
well,
selling
it's
that on your site, or?
well, no, it's not its own individual thing. It comes with the deschooling for the homeschooling parent
Okay.
course.
Okay.
So if that's something that you want to promote, I can definitely
Yeah.
offer a discount for your people if they want to.
Okay. Well,
Um,
shoot me a link and I'll put it underneath this video. And so anybody
okay.
that's interested in that, that would be
Because
great.
I definitely recommend, if you find yourself being like, oh my gosh, why am I homeschooling from a position of like,
Mm,
just
yeah,
that
this
school
video
system mindset, it's a really,
helpful.
mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, really, I know this is like the third time's a charm. I think this is the third time I'm closing this, but you can see this is a topic that Michelle and I are very passionate about.
Mhm.
And I hope you are too, because while I will not lose any sleep worrying about homeschooling being banned tomorrow, I do think that it is something that we do, a freedom that we need to remain vigilant about. So I hope that's all I've left you with, that we need to be doing our own homework as parents and as citizens and as homeschoolers. So there you go. All right, Michelle, thank you again. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.